we're saying there, because usually as soon as somebody starts talking about carbon and sustainability, everybody starts looking for the exits. And quite rightly too, to be honest, because it's these buzzwords, it's a strapline attached to every other promotion just now you'll see in the farming press. But it dovetails in quite nicely with what we've been speaking about this morning. But a wee bit of context first. Why are we even talking about it in the first place? Basically climate change, greenhouse gas emissions and such like. But the Kyoto Agreement basically quantifies where we need to be come 2050, where the agreement stands. It says that the UK is committed to reducing our greenhouse gas emissions by 80% come 2050. How the individual home nations get there is pretty much up to themselves. Scotland has set, or Scottish Government has set a fairly ambitious target of getting to 40% reduction by 2020, and that's based on a 1990 baseline figure. Now at the moment, the UK has decided to do this via promotions of education, essentially, through initiatives such as Farming for a Better Climate in Scotland and through Farming Futures down south. But at some point it could turn into legislation, and we really want to make sure that we've got some baseline information there at an industry level to make sure that we're demonstrating that we're actually doing something about this, because if we don't, the legislation comes into its own. And one thing you probably have seen about CAP 2013 is the greening of the CAP. And this is a bit that I'm slightly concerned about, is what that's actually going to mean. So if nothing else, we need to show that we're doing something about this, because how many times before in the past have we been found wanting, when we're looking for information to demonstrate how much good we're actually doing as an industry, but we don't have the information there. So what we need to do is demonstrate where we're at right now and demonstrate progress. That's a really important point. But it needs to be win-win-wins. Everybody needs to do well out of this, and especially at farm level. If you don't make profit, it all falls to pieces. So first of all, we need to demonstrate the clear link between increasing technical efficiency and the key reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. And there is a very clear link, which is quite interesting, the fact that increasing technical efficiency increases profit, and by default actually reduces the carbon footprint. The second one is reducing the carbon footprint to demonstrate you're doing so for the greater good, if you like. And that's also extremely important that we're doing so. Slightly less tangible, interesting to see what we hear later on this afternoon. But the customer wants this. We're seeing fair trade, we're seeing consumers wanting to be more in touch with what we're doing at farm level. And they want to buy Scottish, or they want to buy the UK, they want to buy stuff with the red tractor on it. But we need to keep that relationship going. And if nothing else, if there's no premium going to be added to doing this, we need to make sure that it doesn't encourage them to go elsewhere, because every other country is looking at this. It's not just a UK issue that's been adopted. The carbon calculators, I'm going to buzz through this, to be honest. There's a few issues with carbon calculating. You'll see you could put the exact same information into a series of different calculators and you'll come up with a slightly different figure at the moment. That's going to get a little more accurate as we go, and it will improve as we get more information. The key here is it's a new science. We don't have all the answers, but the point is it's a bit like conditioned clone cattle, in as much that it's a change that's important. It's a change between where you're at right now and where you want to be. Demonstrate improvement. This is a wee study that was done in the Highlands 3 years back. That's pretty much the relationship of all the greenhouse gas emissions. Sorry, you'll hear me talking about carbon dioxide reductions, but actually I'm talking about all the greenhouse gases, which is there's 6 key greenhouse gases. But the main ones, as far as farming is concerned, are carbon dioxide, methane and nitrous oxide. Carbon dioxide are the thin end of the wedges there, which are talking about fuel and the production of fertilisers. Now really, it's got a bigger check to write, so it's clearly important to do something, to try and do something about it as much as we can, but in carbon point of view, it's actually the lesser part of this. Methane gas production is the area in green. That's a significant bit. That's the rumination from beef cattle and all cattle. Mainly rumination. The blue area, the large blue kind of purpley colour, is nitrous oxide. Now, you'll see here it's slightly surprising as much that's coming from fertilisers and manures, volatilisation into the atmosphere and whatnot. Technically speaking, it's actually a lesser amount, but because it's seen to be 320 times more polluting than carbon dioxide ever is, it's actually proportionately a larger part of the whole process. Now, interestingly, we used some of the information from the North East group that Ian touched upon earlier. Now, it wasn't myself that did this information, so I'll keep it brief. But as you can see from the pie chart, proportionally it's in the same ballpark, but it's a range that I'm actually wanting to talk about here. And the range within the group of those divided figures, this is only finishing animals. This has nothing to do with the suckler cows or anything. It's clear that would have a large impact on it. Within the group, we're talking about between 8.5 and 17 kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalents per kilogram of beef carcass weight. That's a huge range. There's clearly a lot of efficiencies to be had in there. Now, some of it will be due to the land type that they're farming off of, the limitations that has, and there's also genetics and management. Now, if that was in the pig and poultry sector, we're never going to go toe-to-toe with the pig and poultry sector. You know, they're so much more efficiently converting feed into live weight. But that aside, apart from the scale that we're talking about, you'd never see that range within the pig and poultry sector. They've been honing in for so long on the efficiencies of selecting out the genetics and the management practice that gets the highest live weight gain for the least amount of feed for so long now, and that's something we really need to look at. There's such a huge genetic spread and management differences within the beef finishing sector. There's plenty to do. So much so that this is a Cranfield University study which shows that it's 16 tonnes of carbon per tonne of beef, or the equivalent in the different sectors. You can see that we're basically 3 times less efficient than some of these other sectors. Now, as I say, we're never going to get anywhere close to the pig and poultry sector. The point is, there's plenty of opportunities there. We're starting off from a high base, essentially. This is a study done by a colleague back in 2003, which is showing the full the carbon generated from the full system through suckler cow, the replacement, which is the long section in the middle, and then the finished animal. This is the carbon emitted. Now, in every study, it showed that the quicker you finish that animal, there's wee variations for the suckler cow. There's variations in there for how long you keep the replacement before you're put in on calf, or calf on the ground, I should say. But the main variation, without a shadow of doubt, is how long you keep that animal on farm, how long she's going to take to finish. And in every single study, the quicker you can do so, no matter what type of animal you're talking about, the less emissions are being put into the atmosphere. And that includes for the DXs, a dairy cross, purebreds, rotational cross, composite breeds, and using sex semen. Now, just to try and put this into, quantify this in money terms, I've just said that there's more profit in it by getting them finished quicker. The 2010 costing guides, now this is a very familiar trend. It's been going on for the past 6 to 7 years where we're seeing this, or at least 6 to 7 years I've looked at. The intensive finished animal will leave you less gross margin, which basically sale price less your feed and fertiliser costs and such like. It will leave you less gross margin, but because it's on the farm a shorter period of time, basically the turnover from the shed, which is the expensive bit, the turnover from the shed is so much less that you ultimately create a better net margin, and that's key. The quicker you can turn an animal through that shed, with the labour and the machinery is associated with keeping that animal inside, the more money you actually make. Trying to pull out some, well, how are we going to go about this? Well, farming for a better climate, for instance, try and categorise it in 5 key areas: optimising fuel use and energy use, developing renewable energies, optimising the carbon within the soil and vegetation, using fertiliser manures more effectively, and optimising livestock management. The ones in red, point 1, 4 and 5, are the ones that have actually got a direct effect on the beef enterprise. The other 2 have an effect on the farm, so you can go into your renewable energies, you can plant some trees, and it will reduce your carbon footprint of the farm, but it doesn't actually help or do anything to the beef enterprise. It's the beef element we're looking at here, the enterprise effect. So specific stuff at a finishing level, we need to get them off the farm quicker, and to do so we need to make sure there's less challenges on that animal. So less health problems, and I would also put in genetics in there. We need to make sure there's no checks, or as few checks as possible, especially when if they are going out to grass, they are outside and coming inside from an inside diet. You take 2 weeks off an animal, as she recovers from going, or he recovers from going on to a different ration and getting the rumen sorted out again. Rations. Making sure that silage or whatever forage, if they are getting forage, is been analysed. There's a ration made up, and what we're saying they're getting fed is actually being fed, which is another critical point. The old adage, if we can't measure it, we can't do anything about it, and we need to demonstrate we're doing something about this, as well as there being an economic benefit to doing so. Thank you.